word land is coming, this means that this is connected with the lithosphere. So we will be learning about what kind of different surfaces you find on the lithosphere. So lithosphere we know is a topmost layer of the earth's crust, which is land, which is made up of land portion. Okay, so we had in the last chapter we had learnt about the four realms of earth, which were lithosphere, hydrosphere, atmosphere and the biosphere. So in this chapter we will be basically concentrating on the various landforms. That means we will be dealing with the lithosphere. We know that the earth's surface is not same everywhere. Like if you go from here only, if you go towards Shimla, you will see gradually the land surface becomes, the land is becoming, it is rising, it is higher and higher, it goes higher and higher. Your car or bus, whatever you're taking, you will see that the road is becoming inclined, you start climbing over hills. So you will have hills, if you go a little more further to it, you will find very high mountains. And if you go much further, if you cross those mountains towards the side of China, you will find a flat kind of a land which is higher than the normal surface of the earth. Like you will see that there are certain low grounds also. So these are plateaus and then you have the plains. So all these form the different kinds of landforms, okay, which we see on the surface of the earth. If generally they are basically due to the variation in height. Like mountains are the highest, then you have the hills, then you have the plateaus, then you have plains, valleys, and then you have the plains. Okay. So all these are the different kinds of landform. It's not one smooth surface like you have on your table. So earth is not like that. You have variations in the land. So in this chapter we will be learning about these landforms. Now these landforms, why they are important? They play a very important role in the climate. We know as you go higher it becomes cooler. Then in the weather, climate weather and the vegetation. So as we know the habitat of the plants and animals depend on what kind of climate that place has. So the vegetation is affected by that. Then what kind of animals? For vegetation we use a scientific term which is called flora, and fauna, which means the animals, they all are found in a place depending on what kind of landform it is. So landform influences these things. Landform plays an important factor in climate, weather, vegetation and in deciding the fauna or the kind of animals that are found on a place. And also on the diversity of the people living in that place. Link it up with your chapter of civics. You will see that people living in a particular region will eat a particular kind of food, will wear a particular kind of clothes. So all this is dependent on the weather, and the weather is dependent on the landform. So all this is connected with each other. Now how these landforms are formed, if you remember in your class 5th, you would have studied about the earth's the internal structure of earth. You would see that the earth is, the innermost part of the earth is called core and it is solid. Then on that you have a liquid thing, a viscous liquid, a very thick liquid, and on these landforms, what we see today, the land that we feel it is so solid is actually floating on this liquid area or the mantle. Now, when it is floating on this mantle, this land is not one. It is basically 19 plates. 19 different plates form the topmost layer of earth or the lands that we call. These plates are called the tectonic plates. Okay. Now, the earth's crust is floating on this thick viscous liquid. And it leads to, and the temperature is also very high inside. So this leads to lots of changes which are happening inside the surface of the earth. The changes in temperature, pressure, sometimes it causes volcanoes and earthquakes to happen. So all these things are called the internal forces. These happen so suddenly that you will see that area has fallen down, area has sunken below, or some area has risen up. So all these forces, example for them are volcanoes and earthquakes, and otherwise also there are small pressure changes which are happening inside the surface of the earth. These are called the internal forces. So the land can either rise up or fall down, and this leads to the formation of the various landforms by these internal forces. Then we have the external forces, in which you have factors like wind, like the rain, like the moving water, on the ice or the frost formation. You know, some early morning dew, it gets frozen, so that's called frost formation. They change the surface of the earth. This is happening on the surface of the earth. So something which is happening on the surface of the earth, and this is happening all the time, like you will have wind going, you will have temperature, the sun's heat affecting this. So all these things continuously break down the earth's surface, and this is called weathering. So continuous weathering of earth's surface is happening, and these are the external forces which change the landforms. Now these external and internal forces are responsible for the formation of mountains, for the formation of plateaus, for the formation of plains. So all these are the things which the internal forces and the external forces which make these landforms. Okay. Now the surface of the earth is constantly changing. From the top also it is undergoing constant effect of the temperature. The wind is constantly blowing. The running water, the river water is also continuously happening. So all these things will and they change the surface of the earth. Similarly, inside changes are also happening. They are happening in a very slow way. All these changes that we do not notice, but the face of earth's surface is changing all the times. Okay. And so this is the reason behind the external and the internal forces, the reason behind the changing of these forces, the face of the earth's surface. Now after this we will be learning about the various kinds of landforms. The mountains, in this chapter we will be learning about the mountains, the plateaus and the plains. Now we will be learning about mountains. Now mountains, these are much higher than the surrounding areas. As we know, we learned that Mount Everest is the highest mountain that's on earth. So mountains, generally we have an idea that these are very, very high than the surrounding areas, and mountains are conical in shape. Their top part is sharp. When I say hills, they are not so conical in shape. Now this is a mountain. The top part is the sharpest one, which is called the peak of the mountain. Something which you draw when you were in younger classes. Hills are also high area, but they are lesser than these mountains in height, and their top portion is rounded up. This is an example of hill. So these mountains are higher than the earth's, are the high structures that are found on the surface of the earth. Now these mountains, they are connected to each other and they are in a line. It is called a range or a chain of mountains. Chain we use for hills, so a chain of hills or a range of mountains. Now this range can run to thousands of kilometers. If you remember, in the previous chapter we studied that Andes is the longest range of the mountains, and this mountain range it runs through the complete length of the planet, of the continent of South America. So they can run to many kilometers, many thousands kilometers. Okay, now many factors are responsible for the formation of these mountains, and these different factors lead to the formation of different kinds of mountains. So you have 3 different kinds of mountains that you will be studying in your class. The first one are fold mountains, the second one are block mountains, and the third one are volcanic mountains. Now fold mountains. So when the surface, that's the first kind of mountain that we will be studying about. So when the surface of the earth is pushed from 2 opposite directions, it makes folds or wrinkles in it. Okay, let's take this as page. This is the surface of the earth. It is flat, but when 2 different directions are pushing it inside, now one is acting this side, the other is acting this side, you see it is rising into a wrinkle or a fold. So this is how the fold mountains were formed. Now these were formed like when the surface of earth was pushed from two different directions. So this led to the formation of fold mountains. As the name suggests, the direction of the force that were acting on it was in opposite direction, and wrinkles and folds were formed. Now the fold mountains have these characteristics. They are very high. They have very steep slope. They are high. The highest one we know is Mount Everest. They have very steep slopes. Okay, it's not smooth, it is steep, because suddenly you'll find that there is height. So they have very steep slopes. Example for them is Himalayas, which we have in India, Rockies, which are in North America. Then we have Andes, which are in South America. We have Alps, which is in Europe. Switzerland is known for the Alps that are there. Then these mountains are classified as old and young mountains depending on how long or how much before they were formed. So Himalayas, Rockies and Andes are the young fold mountains because they were formed about 60 million years ago. So they are young fold mountains. And Aravallis are the oldest fold mountains. Aravallis are also found in India. So if you've heard of a hill station called Udaipur, it is situated in the Aravalli range. So they were also formed in the same way as these Himalayas were formed, but they were formed much before 60 million years ago. So they are the oldest fold mountains. Now we'll be learning about block mountains and volcanic mountains. The second form of mountains that we will be learning about is block mountains. We know that the Earth's surface is not strong everywhere. There are many cracks which are there on the surface of this Earth, and these cracks are called the faults or the fault lines. Okay, and we know that the surface of the Earth is not connected all throughout. So there are 19 such major land masses which are floating on the molten magma. So because of these faults, now these block mountains are formed because of these faults or the cracks. Sometimes because these are the places which are weak, okay, they are not very strong. So the internal forces act upon these places and they either push a block of mountains, so rocks come together, they form a block, so either they push it up to form a mountain, or they push it down at the place where there is this crack. So either the land will be pushed down or the crust of the earth will rise because of these internal forces. So when such internal forces happen and they lead to the formation of these block mountains. If the land has risen up, we know it has formed a mountain. Even if the land has not risen up, it has fallen down. Let's say the land has fallen down. So the next land which is here will be obviously looking like a mountain. So this is how these block mountains are formed. They are formed when due to these pressure lines or the fault lines which go the internal forces, push them up or push them down. So the area which is pushed down forms the rift valley, or it is also called the graben. The area which is pushed up, which will form the block mountain, is also called the host. Okay, so these are host and the rift valleys or the graben. Host and the graben. Okay, and example for them is the Vosges mountains and the Rhine valley, which is in Europe. In India also we see these mountains. We see them in the Narmada valley. Okay, so if someone has gone to Jabalpur, you would have seen the Bheda Ghat. That is basically the example of these block mountains. Okay. The next one is volcanic mountains. As the name only tells that it is something related to the volcano. So because of the volcano eruption, these mountains are formed. So we know that in the inner surface of the earth is made up of molten magma. So this molten magma will sometimes come out with pressure. So when it comes out and then after a while it will cool down also and it will solidify. So when this magma keeps on coming out and solidifying, it solidifies, it actually rises the land that place. Okay, it forms a cone kind of a thing, and these are formed because when the lava deposits from the underneath due to the volcanic eruptions, so it forms a cone-like structure. So these mountains are basically conical in shape. Example for them is Mount Fujiyama, which you see in so much of Japanese cartoons like Doraemon and all. They have a reference to Mount Fujiyama. Then you have Mount Kilimanjaro, which is in Africa, which is the highest peak in Africa. Mount Vesuvius, which is near Italy. So all these are examples of volcanic mountains. When it comes to India, we have the Barren Island, which is in Andamans. So we have a volcanic mountain kind of a thing in the Andamans. Okay. Now, so these were the three kinds of mountains that we had studied: the full mountains, the block mountains, and the volcanic mountains. Now, why are these mountains so important to us? First thing, because these are higher, so they have snowfall. They have good amount of rainfall, and these are a very important source of water for us. This source of fresh water can be in the form of glaciers, which is the river of ice, or they can be in the form of normal freshwater rivers. If you actually see in India, all the perennial rivers, which means the rivers which have water throughout the year, like the Ganga, like the Yamuna, most of them come out from the Himalayas, the Indus, the Brahmaputra. They all come out from the Himalayas. So that means they are the source of fresh water. Not just fresh water, they are the places where we have maximum hydroelectricity projects, where the electricity is being generated by making this water fall from a height, or we collect this water in a dam form, then we release it and make the turbine run. So that is how these are the source not just of water but also of the electricity. Then they provide fertile land, because mountain areas will have valleys also. So along with this there will be a valley also. So this valley is the area where you have lots of water coming, good amount of fertile soil coming. So they provide fertile land for cultivation. Next is they are generally covered with thick forest, and from thick forest you get so many products, forest products, like you get the wood, like you get the resin, like you get many medicinal plants. So they are a source of thick forest, and from where they provide shelter to animals. So they give us lot many things that way, mountains. Then most of the mountain or hill stations are the tourist places, which make the economy of the place very healthy. So lots of people come there, spend money, and the local people get employment. So that is, they are tourist places. So all these are the certain benefits of mountains. Also, you will have many adventure activities which are taking place on the mountain sides. You have paragliding, you have white water rafting, or you have rappelling. All these things takes place in these tourist places. So these are the places where people like to go and to enjoy, and this builds up the economy of that place. When people go and spend money at a place, the people who live in that area become richer, their lifestyle improves. So that is the importance of mountains for us. So in the next class we will be learning about plateaus and plains. Thank you.